when you're growing up in adversity. Women generally, we don't even have to go deep into the adversity, right? Women in general are more reticent, more ask for less promotions than a man. So for me, the work has to be done by people in positions of privilege who have maybe a bloated sense of self, an overconfidence in their abilities, control of the future, an almost belief that I can create the future, I have enough, I'm God enough to create it. I think those are the places where the work has to be done.
Welcome everybody to our first of the podcast series called Quest for Better Futures. This is a space really to explore our imaginations of the future. What are the futures that young people are going to inherit? What is going to shape our future as well? So we are really looking forward to some of these conversations. And with that, I'd like to introduce our guest for the podcast today, which is Suchetha Bhat, who is the CEO of Dream a Dream. Welcome, Suchetha.
Thank you,
Thank
Neha.
you for making time for this.
Not at all.
Why don't you start with a quick introduction of yourself, what your journey has been like?
Sure. So, like you said, my name is Suchetha. I'm the CEO of Dream a Dream. We are an organization that works with young people, and we look at how we can empower them with life skills or social emotional skills so that they may thrive. And we specifically work with children who are growing up in adversity, and we look at how they can overcome adversity and prepare for an uncertain future.
Okay, let's get started. I think we've been having some conversations in preparation for this. So I think my first question to you would be, do futures exist?
I think, of course, the concept of future is very real. Of course, futures exist. Of course, time is on a continuum. We are, it has forever been there and will forever be there. So in that sense, futures, of course, exist. I think where I take my thinking towards is, does a fixed, definitive future exist that we should all be gearing up for or building up to? If we stay true to what is emerging, then I believe the future can be something that can't even be imagined.
Right. And what guides this staying true to the moment? Like, what guides that then?
Yeah, it's difficult because I do believe that there's a lot of conditioning we carry, right? There's a lot of conditioning around control, right? That if I don't even imagine it, how will I even control? Am I being like just faffing around? Am I just floating? Right? I think we are conditioned to think that we must take charge, we must take control, we must decide what we want to go towards and what we must mean, what we must be aspiring for. It's good. I'm not to discount or, cancel out the whole thing. But I do believe that what guides me is to say true to the process. I am always asking myself, am I focused more on the process of what's happening? Am I listening deeply enough? Am I willing to pause? Am I willing to take accountability, look at failures, right? So the tougher questions I ask myself are around the process. And not so much, have I hit where I wanted to go? Have I moved as far along as I should? So those are what actually guides me. And what it takes, I think, is a little bit deconditioning, working against what might be more normal ways of thinking.
But my other question is on this whole conditioning thing, right? Like, because we have been continuing to operate within these conditioned patterns, we are where we are today. Right? And we are continuing to kind of foster that inequity, and maybe it's getting worse.
Yes,
now.
It is. Yes.
And on top of that, we are seeing all these trends, whether it's climate change, whether it's whatever is happening in the space of tech, and the whole demographic dividend, which India is right now riding the wave, but that's also going to kind of subside. So in that context, what does deconditioning then look like so that we don't carry forward some of these things with us as we are moving along?
My take on it is that these issues are very real. The climate crisis is very real. the unemployment crisis, even today in India, is very real. The demographic dividend of the future is coming, but today also we are sitting on, so many youth being unemployed. All of that is real. I just don't feel like the root cause of this problem is new.
Sure.
Right? It feels like climate crisis is a crisis of this generation, and maybe not even this, the future generation, right? So it feels like it's for the next generation, it's something new. But I don't believe the root causes of that are new. I believe the root causes of the systemic inequity that you're talking about are the same, whether it was the caste system we had thousands of years back, if it's the climate crisis, as seen by who pays the price for the climate crisis. Right? It is the poor who pay a much bigger price for the climate.
And they haven't
crisis.
contributed to it as well.
Exactly, being the least contributor to that. So for me, that inequity is what remains the same. And unless we are willing to look at it from that level of depth and ask ourselves the hard questions of reorienting at that level, at the paradigm level, we may or may not solve a climate crisis. I hope we do. But I believe it'll just get replaced by something else, which is more, just as scary. Correct. And it's just as scary and it's just as, debilitating as the climate crisis is. Of course, if we don't solve the climate crisis, then I guess inequity. Yeah, exactly. Inequity will be the bane of humanity. Yeah, exactly. Will be the bane on which humanity kind of became extinct. But so that's where I come from. That if we look at these root causes, while these issues are the same, we would address them differently, and we'll possibly address them in a way that we don't then keep going from one problem to the other.
So I think what you were saying is that the central sort of aspect to look at is the idea of equity and inequity, and how that is at the root cause of whatever is happening today. Everything is a manifestation of that.
Yeah, whatever has happened historically and
yes. So I think if we have to come back to this idea of equity, and if we really have to center our work around equity, then what does that look like in action? And I also want to ask it from the lens of, say, a civil society organization, because I feel, and this is something that I struggle with a lot, is I feel like the way we design our, I don't even like calling them interventions, because again, that gives a very fixed way of doing certain things, right? But our approaches have become very projectized as well, right? There are fixed deliverables, timelines to run after. You have a 3-year time frame, you have a 5-year time frame. So in that context, how do you center your work around equity? Because you can't control that in many ways, and you can't have fixed deliverables to say that, this is what now we are moving towards becoming more equitable.
I know. No, I'm glad you're framing it like this, Neha, because I do think that sometimes when I'm asked this question, we hope that there is a 5-bullet point, that you do it. But it's not like, I know, is there a framework that is actionable? But it's not. It's not a framework that's actionable. I think becoming equitable is a journey you take. So if I were to share Dream and Dreams journey, I myself joined in 2010. And at that time, we were going through founder burnout transition and all of that. So that made us pause, and we said we need to be intentional about equity in the culture building. And we framed, or we put out something called the people philosophy. It still exists, it's on our website. But the people philosophy of Dream and Dream encompasses how we operate, how we come together, right? What are the policies? What is the umbrella under which that we all operate? And one of the things, as an example, there are many things that are in it, but one of the principles of that is that these policies of Dream a Dream is not meant to find the stars, which is typically, again, how HR operates, especially corporate HR, right? Find the stars and reward them, give them the promotion. High performers, exactly. But for us, it's reverse. The people philosophy is meant to identify who needs the most help, and are we making sure that is offered so that everybody can reach their full potential. Right? So the assumption is that people need help to reach their full potential, and the role of the organization and HR, quote unquote, is to be able to offer them that. So one of the things we put in place as an outcome of this principle is our evaluations are self-reflection based. So anytime you want to take a promotion, you decide. If you have done well, you feel you're ready for it, you can move to the next level. If you're not, that's okay. It's up to you. Your managers, and there's a hierarchy, operational, functional hierarchy. Role hierarchy, which can give you feedback, but the decision itself is with you. Now, we didn't realize at that time, but it's had a huge payoff because it takes away from what are more, managers who come with biases and their own conditioning, and in some cases promote only people who are similar to them. We didn't realize it at that time, but this self-evaluation basically flipped that whole thing and people had agency. So today we have almost 40% of our staff which are alumni of Dream a Dream. They were young people in our program. They joined us as facilitators. Today, from the leadership to facilitators, 40%, we are 100 people and 40 of them are alumni. And I believe that became possible because the system took out any ways in which we could have excluded them, kept them behind because of our own prejudices, my own conditioning. Now, as an offshoot of that, as a continuation of that, the head of our direct impact work is Pavitra KL. She is an alumni and she part of the leadership and she runs this program. And if you go to our thriving centers where young people can come, it's literally a customized program for any young person. A person walks in, they fill in the form, they enroll, and every young person has an individualized journey that they take. And it's designed based on where they are, who they want to be. So you might go through a 30-day life skills module, you might join a vocational training, but the intention is the space is for you to discover who you are. I can never imagine having designed a curriculum like that. Only somebody with that lived experience who came from that understanding of how these systemic barriers can stop you from your full potential could have designed something like that. So equity for me, to come back to your question, is not so much a set of things you do. It is the lens with which you see the world. And the question you ask yourself when you see that something is working or not working. And in most cases, it comes from your lived experiences. So if you have actually done the inner work of unpacking your lived experiences, understanding for you what equity lands at for you in your story, is where I believe you can bring in that lens. And that then translates to program design, strategic decisions, what type of funders you get, all the other things that you spoke about, the organizational culture you build. So the minute you have that lens is where then, according to me, everything else kind of starts falling in place.
I have two questions which are on different tangents. I think the first one is within the org context itself. So when you give people the agency to decide for themselves, all of us also come with our own conditioning, right? And especially for people who are maybe coming from the most sort of vulnerable and adverse backgrounds, maybe they are also more inhibited. And so for them to feel like I can actually exercise my agency maybe takes longer than, say, for someone who's from a more privileged background, right? So one, how do we undo that so that they feel confident and they feel like it's my place to take this decision? But the other flip side to that is also that because of the conditioning I've had, I still also come from a very competitive frame, right? So I might not be ready, but just because I see someone else is saying that they are ready to move forward, so then I also want to move forward. So how do you sort of, deal with some of that?
The second is easier, so let me answer that first. The way we take out the competitiveness at the culture level at Dream a Dream is that your promotion is not dependent on anyone else, right? So you know that by me getting a promotion doesn't mean you won't get it, right? So that's how we take it out. So then people really just decide for themselves. And if you are moving, and I think that inspires me to move, right? There's no scarcity, right? That's the main thing. We want as many leaders as we can. The vision is to have 100 CEOs, right? So if everybody wants to become the CEO, more the merrier. So once you take out that idea of scarcity, which is where competition comes from, right? That there's only finite positions or finite leaderships, roles, that's where it comes from. So you have to take that out. So that's the first piece. And once you take that out, you'll find that people actually are inherently self-reflective and enjoy moving at their own pace versus having, rather than. But the second part is, I think, a more nuanced, again, this lens we need to bring, right? Now, when you frame that, yes, it is true that people, when you're growing up in adversity, women generally, we don't even have to go deep into the adversity, right? Women in general are more reticent, more ask for less promotions than a man. And typically a man thinks he's confident, in most cases before he is. Yes, we have seen that, haven't we? Yeah. But for me, the problem there is not of the person with adversity. I think that's the way to be. I wish we were more responsible. I wish we would be slower. I wish we would hold ourselves to higher standards. I wish we would say, I need more time. So for me, the work has to be done by people in positions of privilege. I do believe that's the extension of where all these problems come from, that it's people in positions of privilege who have maybe a bloated sense of self, an overconfidence in their abilities, control of the future, an almost belief that I can create the future, I have enough, I'm God enough to create it. I think those are the places where the work has to be done. So I would say that to solve for that problem, you have to be willing to create spaces where people in positions of privilege are able to reflect on what do they need to change, and not so much keep asking the more responsible ones to start thinking more aggressively. I think it's we women come across it a lot, right?
And
you need to be more
shift,
correct,
right?
exactly. So that paradigm has to shift. What do we believe is success?
What is considered as success, right? Like that we have to meet certain targets, especially in an org context, that there are deliverables to be met, you have to meet it within a certain timeline. And that becomes the notion of success. And similarly, at an individual level, right? I should achieve certain milestones in my life. But what if we change that idea of success to be present in the moment? And then if we have to work towards that from a future orientation, how would that look like?
Yeah, again, a complex question. Might take me about an hour. No, we have. So there are two parts to this. One is what you're saying is, can we redefine success? And it is a deep exploration at Dream a Dream about how do you redefine success. Now, one of the most common assumptions almost people make when they hear about redefining success is that we replace one parameter of success with another. A very classic, most common example we get is we think that, okay, instead of academic outcomes or jobs, you are now saying, let's have holistic assessments, let's have social emotional learning, right? So you've replaced what are traditional notions of success with now a more subjective or qualitative notions of success. Yeah, correct, right? More progressive notions of success. But actually, that's not what we mean. While that is true, we do 100% believe that the education system must look beyond academic outcomes, must look beyond just job outcomes, must include social emotional learning, must also take into account well-being of children. All of that is true. Having said that, what we are hoping for as the reimagination of success is that the system starts valuing different things. That the system around the child, that the education system, which today, again, from our colonized history, from our much before colonization history of caste and everywhere that we come from, the way it defines it is still working only for a few children. It's almost only for that 100%, 10% out of the 100, and the remaining are left to feel like they are failures, right? Most of us, at least I definitely went through the education system feeling like a failure as a child, clearly not a failure today. So that's what we mean. That can success be about celebrating every child? Can success be about taking every child along? Can the process about making sure every child feels seen and heard be the outcome of education? Can equity be the final goal? And by equity, which then means you're looking at the child who needs most help, most support, and not trying to pick that one child who's the star, who will go on to IIT, IIM, become the CEO of, Google, Apple, and all of that. So I think that's what we mean. That we are not looking at replacing one definition with another, but that can success be about the process of children growing up, the spaces we create for them. And the onus of that is not on them. The onus on that is on the system, and how we as a system are willing to decondition ourselves. So that's one part of your question. But the second part, like you said, how do you make that happen? You make that happen by centering equity. You make that happen by saying that the goal is to not leave any child behind. The goal is to make sure we're all working together. And if we're able to change that, flip that around, instead of saying who was this top 10% of children, then I believe is when true process orientation will come, even in the education system. Because I think the education system is a classic symbol of, when the child starts, we're deciding. It's like, engineer, doctor, bachpan se the question, right? We're constantly boxing them, we're constantly asking them to project into the future, we're constantly preparing them for something that is so many years ahead and almost, right, doesn't matter how you're feeling today and how you're feeling today, that's where we need to go. So that's what I mean. It's a paradigm shift. Right? Can we change the paradigms and these logic models on which education system is built, youth work is built, and in this new paradigm, the process itself is the outcome, and the fact that we are all walking together is really success.
Great. So this brings me to the second question. I think this idea of working with people who are in positions of power, and especially again in the work that we do, a lot of work happens with government systems, right? Which is where a lot of power also resides in terms of how we are also able to engage with the system. So if we have to kind of design for process, and that's where the earlier question of how as NGOs, civil society organizations, we're so much about achieving our targets and our outcomes that I'm not sure that how much time are we being able to give in our design and in our agendas to really facilitate this inside out process, especially with those who are in decision making positions. I feel like there also the paradigm is that let's work with the young people, let's work with the educators who are anyways, I feel like the most voiceless in that system, and we feel like by working with them we'll be able to make like these fundamental shifts and address equity also. So what are your reflections on that how do we work with people in the system in positions of power to facilitate this?
So when we say power and privilege, I separate out what might be positional power that you have and what is more commonly known as rank, or what you're born with, right? This power and privilege that you're born with. There's of course positional hierarchies, power. The government has certain power. NGOs are generally now also in this climate feeling more powerless, helpless. In the power hierarchy, the government has more. Donors obviously have power over NGOs. So those are positional powers. A CEO obviously has more power than a manager in the system. That's one thing, and I park it. Where I come from when I talk about positions of power and privilege is the one we are born with, the rank. Because for me, that's actually what's driving who takes up these positions of power, right? So are we willing to reflect, the government system, it's mostly men. It's mostly Hindu men. It's almost always able-bodied. It's almost always heterosexual, right? It's almost always not just Hindu, but upper caste as well. That for me is the indicator of the issue. That we create a system where only certain people can be successful. So then you think, only if I'm a confident man with good orator skills and, I can project a certain ambition of the future, that makes me a good leader. And then everybody else aspires to be like that. And then the only leaders you get are those kinds, which continue to reperpetuate the problem. So when working against, right, what you're saying, how do you actually shift this? How do you actually shift somebody who's in a position of power? For me, it's an inside-out process. That the real positions of power come from inside of us. It comes from our inability to reflect on our biases, our prejudices. It comes from our own reinforcement of some of these conditionings, the reinforcement of accepting some things as norm, our inability to question because it works for me. Right? This worked for me. I became the CEO. Why should I even think?
And it also blinds me to other people's experiences in some ways.
Exactly. And then I think if this made me successful, why can't you, right? If only you were more confident, you would be more successful, right? We have said that to children. If only they were more confident. If only they could think more critically. If only they could be like me, is essentially the subtext of that. So for me, that change of shifting power comes from an inside-out process, where people in positions of power should be able to have opportunities to reflect. What are their biases? What are their prejudices? Where are their decisions coming from? Are they really listening, like you're saying? Is there enough empathy? And are they willing to cede space, cede voice, cede agency? Not constantly asking the marginalized to rise up, but say, I'm going to step back. I'm going to give a voice to somebody else. I'm going to use my power to make sure someone else gets a seat on the table. When we and who are the privileged can do that, is for me when change can happen.
And do you think as civil society organizations we are being able to do that?
Not at all. I think we are just as much, which is why I say, see, positionally I get that the government or donors have more power than NGOs, but are NGOs actually more equitable? Not at all. I think we as civil society, I know I became a CEO only because I'm an English-speaking, college-educated, Hindu, heterosexual, able-bodied woman. I know that's 90% of the reason why I got this position, and maybe 10% of, I still do have the skills to do the job. But I don't think we have that lens as well. I think we reperpetuate many of these inequities because we are scared to ask the hard questions. We want to control the outcomes. We are competitive inherently. We don't know how to collaborate. We want to get ahead instead of taking everyone along. So we are products of that same conditioning. And I think in that sense, we reperpetuate, unfortunately, the same challenges that we are hoping we can solve for.
Right. So I'm also hearing a lot of letting go of our current ways of being, letting go of some of the paradigms and
the people in positions of power. Yes. And
yes.
Because I consider myself as a person in a position of power, I'm a woman, but other than that, I really have, I grew up also in a upper middle class family. So then yes, my role is to let go, is to cede, is to be step back, is to, almost create space for others.
Right.
So yes, in my position of power, that's how I see my role.
And that, like you said, is a process of emergence, right? And when you create those opportunities, there are multiple possibilities that can unfold.
For a young person, possibly, right?
Yeah.
But that's my role for them. They, of course, need empowerment. They need life skills. They need, if you are marginalized, you, of course, need opportunities to develop your confidence, your agency. I can't ask everybody to let go. If you are struggling today, if you don't have food on the table, you don't have a job, you can't sit back and say, the process will work. No, only in people in positions of privilege can say that. But if we don't say it, then nothing will change.
But even as someone who is in a position of privilege, and so you are working towards bringing this into the design of ways of being, whether it is at an organizational level or how you work with your own stakeholders, again, the outcome is not something then that you can define, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
so what does that letting go of outcomes look like, and what does that being okay with that uncertainty then that comes? Can you share a little bit about what does it mean to be okay with this uncertainty and to not know what will emerge? Because that's the struggle, right? That's when we feel like we need to control, because I feel like I need to know where this is going and what's going to come out.
I think that's, in some ways, I know outcome, we are a little bit like what is outcome and what is process, but that's where I am today. The journey of reaching there to be comfortable is one, to the extent is possible, I listen. I'm trying to listen to intersectional stories. I'm trying to listen to stories that are different from mine. And I'm especially trying to listen to what am I doing to create these systemic barriers. So when I listen to a young person, of course there are challenges that young person is facing and I'm listening to them, but the reflection I do is what am I doing to create this? What is my position of privilege creating in the ecosystem that is happening? So my ability to listen, not only to them and empathize with them, but to reflect on what I do. Then to be able to say I'm failing, right? Okay, if they are having that many challenges, I am failing, there is clearly something I'm getting wrong. Then to take accountability for that, right? I can't just say, I'm a nice person, so it's okay.
Or I'm doing my best.
Yeah, I'm doing my best. Exactly. I have to take accountability. I have to take risks. I have to create a different organizations. I have to be able to say no to donors who I don't want, right? There's so many risks I should be willing to take that can put my position in make it fragile, but I have to be able to do that. How else do I show up for young people? It's not just about them. So then I do that. I take accountability. I make risky choices. I build an organization where I'm okay with being different, with failing, and all of that. And then I think finally redefining success.
So I think like what you just said about listening to young people, and I also want to connect it back to just how there's a lot more conversation happening around how we need more youth-led processes, youth-led futures. So how do we enable this listening to young people? Because young people are also experiencing so much, right, in their everyday, and the trends that we spoke about, whether it's climate change, there's so much anxiety that young people are sitting with. And when you hear some of them, like what you said, it's an experience so different from what we are having. It really opens up a lot. So whether it's joblessness or how they are experiencing climate change, where they are also feeling like, I can see it interrupting my learning process. I can see it interrupting how I socialize with my friends. I'm feeling more isolated. So how do we bring this focus on listening to young people at the core of what we are doing and what really drives our work as well?
I'm not sure there's any other answer than to listen. It sounds so kind of like obvious, right? That's all really there is, to listen. Maybe the dimension I might add to that. One is, obviously, I know you're getting youth voices also on this podcast, but I don't want to speak for them. So first is that. While I listen to these stories, I'm not talking on behalf of them, what they need, all of that. That's essentially the point I think we are trying to make, that we should stop talking on behalf of them or projecting what we think they are saying. But this is what we are listening or hearing. Having said that, and on top of that, I think the point then is, what do you do when you listen? Are you listening and then saying, okay, now let me solve it. Let me take control of this. I am the hero in this young person's life. So let me decide this cool future where they want, and I will, design for you. I think that's where we might have some reflection to do again. So I think what we do with that listening is the key. Are we listening to say, I'm still the hero? Or are we listening to say that, I need to reflect and possibly I'm the villain, and my reflection has to be around what can I do differently versus how can I create something different for you.
I feel like a lot of what you're saying actually links to how futures thinking also speaks about it, because one of the things that it says is that if you have to make young people feel like they have agency over their life, the first step towards that is to get them also to articulate the injustices that they are experiencing. And that is the first step towards the process of change. So, and it's not just with young people, anybody who has to imagine an alternative, to whatever is happening currently needs to start with this reflection on the experience and the idea of injustice and what is my contribution, or am I at the receiving end of it.
In positions of privilege, you're saying, no?
For everybody.
Anybody. So then all of us have to heal our traumas.
So for those who are not in positions of privilege are experiencing that injustice in a certain way, and those who are in positions of power are perpetuating that injustice.
Possibly, yes.
So that articulation has to come front and
that something
center.
Is wrong.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes.
That injustice is happening, inequity is existing.
And I'm also contributing to it.
Absolutely.
So, but I think the other thing which you said was also around this idea of scarcity.
Yes.
Right? And how leading from a scarcity and a deficit mindset, I feel like that also creates this sense of maybe wanting to do too much too fast kind of a thing, and maybe takes the attention away from what really needs attention, because then we're also looking for quick fix solutions in some ways to say that yes, change is happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be scary, like when we think about the climate crisis, it obviously feels like it's so imminent, it's so close, how can I really spend the next 30 years sitting back reflecting on it? It can feel like that. But that's why the paradigm of time has to change. If we think about slowing down as we become slow, then it's a false notion, because you're right, the climate crisis is around the corner. But when we become slow, things emerge which solve for this issue.
Right.
So then the solutions emerge versus we keep running in circles, chasing our tail. So that's why we have to understand, I'm not talking about becoming slower. I'm just saying when we slow down, things emerge.
And are we attention to the right
correct?
Things
and are we willing for that to emerge and respond and then create from there?
So we are where we are today because of certain sort of decisions and policies that were shaped in the past. How do you think, what do you think were the notions which have gotten us where we are today? And you've touched upon it a little bit, but maybe opening that up a little bit more. And again, if we are now moving forward, how do we also make sure that we don't repeat what has gotten us here?
And by here you mean education, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
Societies.
Another how learning is happening, what our
correct.
framework of success is,
correct.
and therefore what we expect out of young people as well.
Exactly. I think, the fact is we did get independence, but we took the same education system that the Britishers left behind, right? So in that sense, it's still a very colonized system, which was designed specifically to create, the whole idea was that they needed clerks and, administrators for the empire to kind of function. So in that sense, we still kept that, and we still keep that, and that's
the premium on English.
Exactly. So because of that, right, the premium on English, the premium on finding the stars, the idea around, who success is becoming better than others, the inherent value system of competition, this inherent notion of scarcity, right, that only some of us can be successful, so I need to work harder than everybody else to be the successful one, right? So I think many of those fundamental beliefs we didn't change. We took those beliefs, we accepted them, we're still perpetuating them. So to me, that's essentially why we're here. Not to romanticize, I don't think we had a great education system before the Britishers came anyway. So we have had our caste system now for 5,000 years, from what I understand. So in the sense, I'm not offering I wish we could go back to an earlier time, because I don't think we've ever gotten it right. But having said that, I do believe that we haven't done paradigm shifts. That while we might have done innovation, we have brought in, obviously, there's more children in school today than ever in the history of the country. We have our higher education institutes. We have, Indians ruling the world almost, especially in the tech world. So while all of that is true, I think all of that became possible in the same paradigm, which is about a few young people becoming successful, mostly because they have the opportunities and privileges that make them successful. Unless we're willing to shift the paradigm and say education is about taking every child along, it's about, are we meeting and listening to the most marginalized voices? Are we making sure that the child who needs it the most is the one that's getting the most, attention or love? And we bring that justice angle to it, that it's not my benevolence that does it, it's their right, and I have to take accountability for the injustice.
But tell me, in terms of this paradigm, do you think these paradigms are coexisting right now, and one is maybe more predominant than the other? Because even historically, we had a notion of how learning needs to be head, hand, heart, right? Yes. Nai Talim is based on that. It's based on the idea that there shouldn't be this hierarchy and dichotomy between, vocational work and more academic, intellectual work. So paradigms have existed, but somehow they have not been mainstreamed. And why do you think that has not happened? Because we've had alternatives. Why have we not been able to take these alternatives and say that this is who we want to be?
So the first point, yes, multiple paradigms always exist. Multiple paradigms exist inside a person also. I make the binary distinction of people, marginalized people and privileged. People with privilege, but that's not a binary, right? Like I said, I am a woman and I face my set of challenges because of that. And there are, I know, in our young people who bully the Muslim boy in the kid. In the Hindu minority school where we work, we have seen the Muslim boy being bullied. So again, I'm not trying
black
to...
and white,
there are no binaries. It's all a spectrum. marginalization, privilege is all a spectrum. Paradigms are a spectrum. It's not, replace one with the other. We are always, right? It's a more complex juxtaposition of many different things happening. Having said that, I believe the reason it doesn't, some paradigms get mainstream and some not, is again who takes the decisions. If the decisions are being taken by people for whom this paradigm has worked, then where is the incentive to change it? So because of that, I think we keep making choices which keep landing up in the same places.
I think this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for opening up so many strands for us.
So no, thank you so much for having me. Those were some great questions. I've said things that, maybe I've never fully articulated like this before. So it was a great conversation. Thank you so much for having me, and I've had a great time.